The Kennedys, certainly no other family in American history, has captured our imagination in the same way. We like to read good things, we like to read bad things, and there is a book out right now by Marcia Chellis, which talks about Joan Kennedy. Marcia Chellis was her secretary, and our own Glenn Plaskin was granted an interview to kind of refute many of the things that were said in that article. Glenn, of course, from Western New York, the author of Horowitz, writes for M Magazine, Family Circle, Ladies Home Journal, you name it, you write there, right?
Wow. Hi.
But just a little while back, somehow you got Joan Kennedy's confidence, and she agreed to be interviewed by you because she was very upset by this book that came out.
I didn't think she would do it, but I had interviewed Senator Kennedy in June for Ladies Home Journal, and I picked up the phone one day and I called his office and I said, I'd like to interview Mrs. Kennedy. Well, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy are no longer married, and oddly enough, he did call her on the phone, and he said that, you know, if you want to do an interview, I don't think he'll do a bad job. So she did do the interview, and I know that People magazine wanted her on the cover, and she wouldn't even do that.
In fact, if you picked up the October issue of Family Circle, it has a chocolate chip cookie on the cover, but inside there is this article, Joan Kennedy. Now, what was she like? What kind of a person? Because we get one view from this book that Marcia Chellis wrote, kind of a very insecure woman who was really raked over the coals by the Kennedy family.
I think that she is an insecure woman. We're all insecure to different degrees, but there's no question that she is. She's been through a lot, just living with a husband who's been through some incidents of public scandal and the Kennedy family tragedies, just that alone. And she's told me that she always felt overshadowed by the Kennedy family. In fact, her mother-in-law, Rose Kennedy, who lives just down the beach from the house where I went in Nantucket, used to tell her, don't feel that you have to play touch football, and don't feel that you can't develop your musical interest, because as you know, she's quite a good pianist. And in fact, she and I, during my visit, played piano duets. And she called just a few days ago and she said to me that she has to prepare some music for a benefit that she and Teddy Jr. are doing in Boston. And she said, what do you do when you don't practice? You know, how do you get yourself to practice? And I said, well, I don't get myself to practice anymore. But she was very nice. And when I went up there, she had a turkey dinner, and they were all in bikinis. She has a daughter, Kara, who was in a bikini, and she was in a bikini. And she told me...
So it was an enjoyable trip, Glenn.
Oh, very nice, yes. You get to go to Nantucket for 2 days, and someone else pays. It's very good. And she told me that she loves to dance naked. She takes all her clothes off, and she goes out into the backyard, and she puts on a Frank Sinatra record singing New York, New York. And she said it's wonderful exercise, and it gives her a great sense of freedom. Now, we didn't do this together, of course.
Glenn, you know, when you tell me something like that, I wonder, how does this topic come up in a conversation? I mean, how does one...
I'll tell you something very interesting. You interview people all the time, and she told me she'd only talk about motherhood, music, and the other M I can't remember. As we sat down after dinner by the fire, she started talking about her divorce, her feelings about the Kennedy family, and she volunteered on her own this story about how she relaxes, which is by taking off her clothes and dancing naked. The magazine Family Circle wouldn't even print it because they thought it was too...
Well, I was just thinking what you're telling us now, in a way, could be as damaging as what Marcia Chellis has written in her book.
No. What I'm telling you now is totally innocent. She wouldn't have told it to me if she didn't want it in print. In fact, she's one of the shrewdest politicians you've ever met, and she told me that over dinner, that she said no one should ever underestimate me. She was the one who, in fact, engineered the cellist Rostropovich's exit from the Soviet Union. Senator Kennedy often got the credit for it, but she said no, she did it. And in fact, Senator Kennedy often in the press gets credit for being such a wonderful father, which he is, but she says that she feels that she doesn't get enough credit for being both a good mother and for being a good politician. And in truth, she's been both.
You know, I was just thinking about if you compare, say, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Joan Kennedy, both women that are exceptionally bright and talented, but both women who kind of had to sublimate their own individuality because of the unique positions their husbands held.
Well, she told me that both she and Jackie both were always sort of the outside sister-in-laws because they both liked to go on the beach and read a book and be away from the football game kind of scene. And Jackie's been a great friend to her. In fact, in this book that came out, which I haven't read, I'm told that she often went to Jackie asking for advice about what was considered a rocky marriage, you know.
What has been the reaction? Of course, the article is now out in Family Circle. Was the Kennedy family pleased with it?
We have to understand this book was written by a woman who has capitalized on her friendship with them. You would not want a friend like this woman. And she's just gone ahead and told everything that she knew. The really violating part of it, though, is that she is a former alcoholic herself who went with Joan to Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you know, the anonymity of Alcoholics Anonymous is sort of a sacred one. And what this woman has done is she's violated it for money. And as Joan says in my article, this is really unconscionable, not because of what it reveals about Joan, because Joan said she's already told her own story. Everybody knows this stuff. But other women in the country who go to Alcoholics Anonymous might feel that they could be betrayed by other people. It's like going to a therapy group and everybody leaving the group and telling everyone else all your problems.
Is she a woman who has finally come into her own? Because, as you mentioned, she went through the alcoholism. She went through the publicity surrounding her husband and various infidelities and tremendous problems and pressures. Is Joan Kennedy's own identity now finally coming out?
I think so, and she told me that to get into herself and to center herself, she often goes to a monastery in western Massachusetts, and for 3 days she gets up at 6 in the morning and takes walks in the woods, and she is a religious person. And what I liked about her most was she was sitting next to me at dinner eating turkey, and she was so kind. She listened. Teddy Jr. was sitting at the head of the table, and he's just like his father. He looks like his father, and he sounds like his father. And she was genuinely interested in what everybody had to say. And she looked beautiful.
Well, your next big story that's coming out is one on Kenny Rogers. That's going to be in the Christmas edition of Family Circle. What kind of a...
He dressed up as Santa Claus.
You're kidding, for the interview?
Oh, and he's going to be on the cover, and I went out to Hollywood to interview him, and as you may know, he and his wife, Marianne Rogers, who used to be on Hee Haw,
right,
are renowned in Hollywood for living in this $20 million house.
Now, was it nice?
Oh, yes, very nice. I'd take one room of it. And he was very forthcoming. He came in an Adidas outfit. I think he's an Adidas spokesman. And he talked about his children in great detail. And in fact, he told me that he hadn't been such a good father to his 2 grown children, but now he had sort of a second chance because Marianne is his 4th wife, and he's got a little 3-year-old son, Christopher. And it was interesting.
Well, that's the Christmas edition of Family Circle, and there are a great many other stories that are coming out. I know you're going to be talking to Lena Horne, or in negotiations to do another interview with our First Lady, Nancy Reagan. It's always fun because we get to kind of peek in on what the stars are doing when you come here, Jim. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, we'll be back.
Next, get set for the winner.